Dum 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 dum. There's a stain on my garment, dear Aisha, dear Aisha. There's a stain on my garment, dear Aisha, a stain. Tell me how did it get there, Muhammad, Muhammad? Tell me how did it get there, Muhammad? Tell me. Sexy slave girls, dear Aisha, dear Aisha, dear Aisha. Sexy slave girls, dear Aisha. I just lost control. There's Maria Al-Qubtiya, Rayana bin Sayed, Ayman and others. You know I can't wait. But Bilal's calling Adhan, Muhammad, Muhammad. Now it's time for the salat, Muhammad, it's time. Then scrape it, dear Aisha, dear Aisha, dear Aisha. Then scrape it, dear Aisha, dear Aisha, scrape it. Sahih Muslim 572-3377, Surah 66, Al-Bukhari 232, Surah 424.
Allah is a false god, a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god. And Muhammad is not a prophet. Muhammad is not a prophet. If you want grace and mercy and love, Islam is not for you. But Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the King of Kings who died to save us all. If you just repent and believe He took your sins on the cross, then mercy and grace, forgiveness and love, eternity can be yours. But Allah is a false god, a false god, a false god. Allah is a false god, a false god.
Hallelujah. Let Lord Jesus Christ shine forth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us. Welcome to another live stream with DCCI Ministries. So tonight we are going to talk about something a little bit different than what we usually talk, but it is still, I believe, closely linked with Islam. One of the topic which is pretty much silent, how much attention you want to bring still. It is very difficult to bring attention. In Britain, which is not a Muslim country, not run by Muslims, supposed to be identified as like Great Britain, largely Pakistani heritage, or you can say approximately 85% Muslim men sexually abused young girls in Britain and sold them, made money from them, raped them, put life of their family in danger. Sadly, Britain authorities, including police officers as well as the councils, stayed silent, and they didn't want to talk about it. They tried to shut the conversation down and simply turn blind eye for those girls as those girls are being raped. I think it is very sad because, first of all, we don't even know the exact number of the girls, but around Britain, it has been talked, I think 2 years ago, we are talking approximately 200,000 British girls all together around the world. Not around the world, sorry, around the Britain. And tonight, I do have a privilege of having Peter Mcilvenna. I hope.
On.
Yeah, Peter with us. He is the host of YouTube channel called Hearts of Oak. Please check it out. You will see lots of things linked with this topic as well in that channel. So he's willing to give us a little bit of his time and then help us to think through why it is happening, what is the problem, and how did we get there at the first place? Is there a way that we can solve this problem? Peace of Christ be with you, brother. How are you?
I am wonderful, Hatun. It's an honor and a blessing to be with you. Thank you so much for the invite.
Well, I hope by the end of the live stream you will say the same thing.
I've known you long enough, and I still say the same thing. It's a privilege to join you, and the work that you do as a Christian speaking truth is wonderful. So it's an honor to be with you.
Thank you, brother. So, Peter, probably my audience don't know who you are, because the kind of areas we work is a little bit different from one another. Yet, whatever area we work, we still intentionally and actively try to serve our crucified and risen Lord. Would you be kind enough and just introduce yourself to us a little bit, and then I will ask a couple of follow-up questions.
Yes, well, my name is Peter Mcilvenna. I married, 2 kids, live in London, and go to a big black majority Pentecostal church here in West London. Very lively, all good fun. And what I do for work, well, politics I've done a long time. I work in the House of Lords with Lord Pearson of Rannoch, who was Margaret Thatcher's last appointee in the House of Lords, and also was leader of UKIP. So I worked with him for 12 years. And ended up doing lots of other things. So the last 2.5 years, I have headed up a organization called Hearts of Oak, which has been it's ended up being a media organization, and we focus on so many issues. We have 2 guest interviews every Monday and Thursday. Hatun, you've been on 2 or 3 times, as has people like Jay Smith, Robert Spencer, David Horowitz. We've had lots of people talking on the topic of Islam, and Islam is probably 20 to 25% of our content. We've had probably about 140 guests on 250 different live streams, and those are all available on, some of them are on YouTube. Also, they're also available on Getter, on Rumble, on BitChute, so many other things. And the focus is on, I think, freedom of speech in a whole range of areas. And I'm passionate about being able to critique religions and debate. As a Christian, I think that's vital. I am passionate for the family. I enjoy my country, so I enjoy the culture, the heritage. I talk to people about immigration issues. I think we should have controlled immigration. And there are a whole range of other things. And as a Christian, it all boils down to loving your neighbor. And how do you love your neighbor? By speaking truth to them and presenting what is right and wrong in a society where anything is up for grabs and truth no longer exists. So that's what we've done as Hearts of Oak. I do lots of other things on the side. I've been on lots of other, Steve Bannon's War Room, been on regularly, write regularly for Gateway Pundit, help Getter in the UK, which is a social media platform here in the UK, and lots of things I'm involved in doing. Just as an example, the last week, a week ago, I was over in Poland with the OSCE, the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, which is the largest intergovernmental body looking at security. So you've got the United Nations, the biggest intergovernmental department, probably the OSCE is number 2. And I went along there as Hearts of Oak. Went with a number of others. Elizabeth Sabadich-Wolf. Do you know Elizabeth Sabadich-Wolf?
No.
She went through the court system in Europe because she talked about Muhammad and 6-year-olds.
Yeah.
So she's written a book, Truth is No Defense, which basically means even if you present truth in your argument, that's no defense if you offend someone, and often that's Islam. So I was with her, and I was able to speak for 3.5 minutes at the plenary session on women in Islam, or looking at women's rights in regards to marriage. Many Muslim women are not regarded as married under British law, and then looked at the grooming gangs and the way our authorities have turned a blind eye. So that was 3.5 minutes, something that they don't want to accept, because I was, of course, a huge Islamophobe talking about all of that. So those are the the range of things that I talk. And then more recently, probably, we've also talked a lot about the whole lockdown and restrictions on us through the whole COVID mandates, and also the issue on gender. Now we live in a society where a man can wake up one day and decide he's a woman, to talk about male and female. And as you know, as a Christian, it's easy because God made us male and female. Quite simple. And we now have tried to bring in hundreds of new genders, and we take man and try to make man in our own image instead of how God has made us. So all those issues we end up talking into, and talk to so many guests on those issues. And as I said, Islam, we wanted Islam to be our main focus, and then lockdown happened within 2 weeks of launching. So lockdown's probably 25%, Islam is 25%, and then we have a range of maybe a dozen other issues. So yeah, that's more or less what I'm up to.
Well, it's good that you are touching things which is on like our daily life and bringing attention to them, because it is difficult to just focus on one thing and then ignore the rest. I try to do that, just focus on one thing and then ignore the rest. It is good I've got brothers around who are focusing on other things as well. Just a quick practical question. So, Britain is supposed to be a great country where we are all treated equally, equal under the law, protected by police, and we pay our taxes for council to provide our very basic needs. Along the way, something went wrong. I think first time it was back in 2013, I come across something called grooming gangs. I didn't know what it was, but when it kind of brought to people's attention by Tommy Robinson, it was difficult to ignore. So since we are going to talk about grooming gangs, how did you come across with grooming gangs?
It would have been working with Lord Pearson, and Lord Pearson is probably the most outspoken peer in the House of Lords on Islam, with Baroness Cox being the only other one who will address these issues. And that's out of 850 members of the House of Lords, there are 2 that will actually address this, and they're both in their 80s. So that's something for your viewers to pray over, where we go as a generation, as a society, whenever our spokespeople actually are coming near the end of their time, and who fills that. So it would have been with Lord Pearson. He is never afraid to ask a difficult question. And I think we had both come aware of grooming gangs probably back in 2012. I started working with Lord Pearson, I think 2010. Maybe 2009 even. And 2012 was Andrew Norfolk's front cover on the Times newspaper here. And that was the first time the UK public were even aware that something had been happening. And then it was from that point of one journalist who was courageous enough to go where the evidence led him and say, this is what I see is happening, and no one has talked about it. He published that front page 2012 on the Times. And I think from that point, it was like, wow, this is huge. This is unbelievable. And then we started delving deeper into it and found out how awful it is, how covered up it's been, how disgusting it is, and therefore people don't want to address. And it leads into the whole world. And Hatuna, I get it that people don't even want to discuss it because it is so horrendous, so unbelievable when you listen to the girls and what has happened to them, and how they've been let down time and time again by everyone in authority. It's something that actually you don't want to address, because we don't want our nice, safe, happy lives affected by the truth. But as Christians, we are here to speak truth, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. So it's been 10 years now of looking at this, and I often wish that God showed us easier topics to address, but we don't get to choose. We're shown things, and it's up to us how we respond to those issues.
So kind of on the social media or on the news, it has been identified as grooming gangs, but it is kind of Britain's rape gangs. So group of men, mainly Pakistan heritage, are intentionally seeking for young girls, white young girls, approaching to them, using them for their sexual desire, and passing them around, torturing them, even making money from them, and kind of setting up that business. So much abuse and so much ugliness in it. I did listen some of the girls' testimonies, what happened to them. It is sickening. And while kind of that happens, today, we don't know the number of the girls.
No. So we have all different numbers, and people are trying to get to the bottom of it. The problem is it's difficult to get to the bottom of something when there are many in authority that don't want you to know about it. And don't trust me, don't think that I am some crazed conspiracy theorist, because if this is the first time you've heard of this, you may think that. Sarah Champion, Labour MP for Rotherham, one of the towns where this is happening, one of 40 towns across the UK where this has happened over a period of 40 years. Sarah Champion, Labour MP herself, to the Daily Mirror, I think 4 years ago newspaper, said that she thought that up to 1 million girls were affected by this. Wow. Now, the figures we have for some of the towns, the Daily Mirror did a very thorough investigative report in Telford, and they talked about at least 1,400 girls were part of these, being raped by these gangs. And then you look at other, not just Telford, look at Rotherham, you look at Rochdale, and the figures are exactly the same. And you discover a network of abuse, as you said, run by gangs. And the disgusting thing is, we often find these are family members carrying this out. When you look down the names of people who've been arrested, put away, you look at the addresses, you realize that in these communities, we have groups carrying it out who are father, son, brother, and brother. Now,
It's
that just
family business.
yeah, but that just blows your mind as I mean, you don't have to be a Christian. You just have to be a normal person that believes in some level of right and wrong, that has some rules, that has guidelines for life. And you know that is not how you conduct yourself in society. It's what we're brought up to know and think. But this has been happening, and the issue that it's been under the radar and not exposed has been, as you said, it is predominantly Pakistani men, predominantly. So you've got Pakistani background, Muslim background. And I think Quilliam talked about 84, 85%. When you looked on the convictions of the 420 men who've been convicted already, you're looking at around 90% of the names that come out as someone with a name that you would then take as Pakistani Muslim background. So that's not definitive. That's not looking deeper. It's just looking at the name face value, and then you need to go deeper into that.
Yeah, so I'll express so far what you said. I'll bring up a couple of my problems. I think since we don't live in Pakistan or in China, or even in Iran, because like the things happens in those countries, in our mind is, okay, no one is going to talk about it. Informations are going to get lost. We don't even know what's happening. But in Britain, I think it is great sadness. We don't even know the number of the girls. And we are saying it's approximately 1 million. It might be bigger than that or less than that, but even not knowing how many beautiful young girls are being affected by it, I think that's a problem by itself. And not able to identify. So a couple of years ago, I took a list to Speaker's Corner where I had the name of the people, name of the individuals who were convicted. You get to see Muhammad, Muhammad, Muhammad,
Yeah.
Muhammad, Muhammad. You get to hear court testimonies where girl is saying he came back from mosque. He prayed, like being intentional to shut down the conversations because of the ideology of those people. We don't want to talk about it because it is the people who follow the ideology of Islam are raping your girls in this country, and we don't want to talk about it. You mentioned Rotherham. I remember, like, there was a story. One of the girl, they put petrol on one of the girl, and then they said, like, if you talk about it, we will set a fire and then we will kill you. And while that is happening, like, there is a testimony of the girls whose tongue is being nailed on the table if they go and talk about it. And report came out when they were kind of trying to figure out what is the background of it, what is all those kind of things. They decided actually no one wanted to talk about it because they didn't want to come across as a racist. They didn't want to come across as standing against one ideology. I think just like by itself, it's so disgusting, especially country like Great Britain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When you begin to look at the names and you begin to look at the sentences, first of all, you say, yeah, we don't know. So Sarah Champion says up to 1 million. When Lord Pearson talks about this House Lord, he says, okay, let's cut that down. Let's say it's a quarter of that. Let's stay well within kind of a safe number, so we can never be accused of exaggerating. We simply have to look at the facts. Often we don't have all the facts. So if MPs are saying 1 million, let's say it's 250,000, let's reduce it. That should still shock anyone that this has happened. But you're right, the amount of reports and investigations and papers and reviews that have been done on this, the millions and millions of pounds that have been spent simply putting information down, but not actually doing anything about it, really, is sickening to the core. I know that the Conservative government have done many reviews into this. The Home Office did one, different departments have done them. Then we have separate councils doing them. Then we have other authorities doing them. We have and then we have national. We have the Alexa one. We have in 2012, 2014, we have national ones, and then the independent one on sexual abuse is the latest one to be done. That was a 7-year report. But Hutton, all of it seems to be just to provide work for people to analyze a problem. So these people are paid money to actually put a report together. They spend millions of pounds doing this. They produce a report, often a huge report with hundreds of recommendations. And then there's no actual follow-up to see, is anything done on this? There's nothing. What's the point in spending all that time doing a report that actually the public don't really see and doesn't make any changes? And there'd be no definitive reports on the amount of girls affected. The numbers we get are, if you take a town, you look at the number in there, we've got convictions in 40 different towns, then you begin to put those numbers out and you begin to get an estimate of the possible numbers. But we only have 420 men, I think 420 men at the last count, were actually convicted of these crimes and sentenced for them. But that doesn't really give a understanding of the amount of girls that are affected and the scale of it. And this is not just an historic issue. Yes, it has been happening for 40 years, but we are still reading many reports of gangs being arrested for historic. So you're looking at 95, 2000, 2005. But when you talk to any of these girls, when you listen to any of them, they talk about this still happening today, right now, because these men know that the police don't do anything to stop them, and therefore they can get away with it. So if they're doing something they want to do and the police don't stop them, then it continues in our society, in these communities, because no one will actually stop. And the people who do speak against it, you mentioned Tommy, but many others, they get then tarred with a brush of racist, Islamophobic, far right. How we've come to a stage in our society where you get labeled and criticized if you say raping girls is wrong. That suddenly makes you a bad person. That's the twisted state we become, sadly, where truth becomes a lie, everything gets turned on its head. And that is where we currently are in the UK, that this is not something you talk about or address. And you do address it, then you get punished. You can get punished in social media, but also you get called so many names simply for caring for girls and wanting girls not to be sexually abused.
Then when someone made a point, this can't be Islam. I just wanted to respond to that and let people to reflect on it. Islam has very, very low view of woman. Islam has very low view of non-Muslim woman. According to Surah 24, verse 33, prostitution is okay. If you put the girl into the prostitution, Allah is merciful, will forgive you. Don't practice prostitution, but if you do so, Allah is merciful and will forgive you. Non-covering girls, non-covering women are potential to be seen as a whore. Surah 33, verse 59. And if you hear the court cases of those rape gangs in their hearings, they identify those girls as they are like dirty lollipops. Those are very very basic teachings of Islam. And it is, of course, under the label of not being seen Islamophobe, or if you want to be political correct, you simply say, well, it is just a possibility that end up that 84% of people who are convicted end up having the name of Muhammad. That's just like chance. It is just chance that those people go to mosque. It is just a chance that those people fast during the Ramadan. It's all chance. You can say that if you want to. But at the end, you need to remember there are girls who've been raped, who've been threatened, whose families are being affected. And we all turn blind eye to that. Why? Because people like you didn't want to identify the problem to solve it. Just shame that, like, with everything out there and everything is being hidden, we've got people who are saying it has nothing to do with Islam. It is just chances, strange chances comes together.
Hatun, can I come in on that? Because I've also had that many times. And I think we have a whole mix of issues here. Some of them more in play than others. You talk to many of these girls and they talk about the Quran being recited over them. So the rape seems to be some kind of religious rape. How perverted is that? All these men want to be good Muslims in their society. You've got all of that side, and you've got all the text, you've got the life of Muhammad, you've got how women are treated, all of that on one side. But then also you've got a cultural mix within that, in that you've got a separation of men and women. But again, that's part of the religion. And I think it's often difficult to separate the culture and religion because Islam is so entwined in so many cultures that when someone says, actually, it's just because they've never seen a woman without a burqa before. Well, that is cultural, but it's also religious. And it's people try and separate and say this is simply a cultural issue and nothing to do with religion. But no, it's both of them mixed together.
Yeah. And sad is like we're just turning blind eye. We are turning blind eye. So we express that numbers might be between 200,000 to 1 million. So sadly, we don't even know how many girls are being affected. And then we talked about a little bit what happened to them. You expressed approximately 420 of men is being sentenced.
So yes, it was Peter McCulloch actually kept a tally. He wrote a book called Easy Meat. He's the only individual to write a book on this, to catalog what was happening. He saw what was happening, and again, a lot of us we engage in stuff. We talk about the issues. Actually, for someone to sit down and to spend maybe a year of their life just to catalog what was happening, to put it together, to make it available in a book. Was phenomenal to do that. That wasn't for money. It certainly wasn't for fame, because he suffered greatly for it. It was simply because he saw an issue and wanted to get the truth out. So alongside that, on his website, he had a list of the convictions and done by date order. And you would have you might take a date, February 2020, and then on a certain date, it would be Huddersfield Court or Keighley Court or Oxford Court. And then it would list the men who were in that trial. And then it would, that's all it would do, just list the men. And those individuals then were convicted of that crime. I don't think there were any single people. It was all done as a group, often these family groups, as I've said. But you go down the names and you get an idea of what's happening. Now, no one else has actually done a catalog like that before, and you can find them easy. You type in grooming gangs, you type in child sexual exploitation gangs, however you want to, and you begin to look through those towns, those areas, and you get so many newspaper reports. You find out a newspaper has reported a gang of 6 men has now been convicted of these crimes, and it was done this date, and they went away to prison. So you've got those 420 odd, but that's only the beginning of the story. That just gives you an insight. There are other layers on top of this. One layer is, how long do they actually get sentenced and put away for? Well, I know one girl very well. It's actually this girl. This is her book. This is her book, Snatched, Elizabeth Harper, My True Story of Survivor. I've got to know Elizabeth well over the last 2 years. And along with many other girls who I've met, some of them I've sat in Baroness Cox's. She's part of an all-party parliamentary group on honor-based abuse is the name. And she regularly has these girls come and give evidence so MPs can come and hear these harrowing tales, because no one else talks about it. So yeah, those are obviously some of the pictures, the covers. There's horrific betrayal of 1,400 children from the Daily Mirror. Those are the mugshots you get in so many of these newspapers, so many of the stories. And time and time again, you get the same types of names, the same types of areas. But again, they're up to 40 towns. They're towns like Swindon, like Oxford, kind of English towns you think this wouldn't be happening in. But yes, it is coming. And it happens because these men can get up to what they want to and a blind eye is turned. But the conviction rates. So for raping children, these men are getting as low as 4 years. So on one trial, the Rochdale 9 was one trial, and that's a whole deportation issue as well. But 9 men were convicted of being part of this. The lowest sentence was 4 years. The highest was 22 years. But 8 of them got between 4 and 9 years, or 4 and 10 years. This is for raping children, 4 years, and they get out half of that time after good behavior.
Sorry. I need to understand that correctly.
Yep.
Raping a child you get 4 years prison sentence.
In some of these sentences, they're getting as low as 4 years. Yes.
4 years.
Some of them, the court decide we cannot prove they actually raped the child, but they were trafficking the children, they were taking money, they were involved in the whole process, so they get lesser. But I think the lowest for any individual on a count of child rape was about 5.5 years, the lowest. They're all convicted of different things. They're all convicted of rape, but also down to the lowest level of facilitating, of processing, of helping drive all these girls around. It becomes a business. You've got clients, so it becomes a whole pimping prostitution business. But I think the lowest level is 5 years for actually raping a child, and they get out after good behavior, 2.5 years.
Okay, so you were sentenced for, let's say, be generous, 6 years, and then you can get out within 3 years.
Yeah.
If you are good in. Okay.
Yeah. But what does it mean, good behavior in prison? I mean, you're convicted of rape. You don't rape anyone in prison, or what on earth would mean good behavior for someone like that? To me, we need a system, a process that doesn't let someone out in society until they are ruled that they are no longer a risk. You can't let someone back out. Prison has to be punishment, but also rehabilitation. And I think from everything I've seen that rehabilitation is not high up. It's simply a rap on the knuckles. Don't get caught, basically. They get released again, and the police are too busy. The police are too busy checking people's Twitter accounts. Like my good friend Caroline Farrow on Monday, who was arrested for putting stuff on Twitter. Child rape, and I think rape convictions are about 1.5% generally. So an individual who says they've been raped, it's 1.5% that they actually conviction rate. So it's extremely low. So we've got a whole failure in the system to actually try these individuals, to actually gather evidence and to put them away for a long enough time and to make sure they don't carry it out again. All those areas we're failing in. And I don't know how we fix that as a society when the authorities, our government, our child services, our local councils, our MPs, no one actually wants to address it and fix the problem, because the problem seems to come from a particular group in society, men of Pakistani background, Muslim background, and therefore there is a fear of addressing this issue, because how would it affect your career as a police officer or as a council official if you dealt with this? Better to deal with litter on the street or some antisocial behavior, but not this, because this will damage your career. And again, with the court system, from what I have ascertained, there is also pressure on the court system not to go above and beyond and not to stir things up, because it will stir up community tensions and it will affect their career path. Therefore, just turn a blind eye to this and don't deal with it.
I don't know. I just find it's like just worse than ugly. Just worse than ugly.
It is. And again, I raised this at the OSCE conference. I said, one of the big failures we have in the UK is a failure to prosecute and punish those who have turned a blind eye. So in our local councils, I think Rotherham Council was disbanded. All 60 councillors were basically sacked and the council started again. Many of those councillors got re-voted in again, so they just got their old jobs back again. But none of those, basically a council, a police force, child services, they all say, we must do better. We failed, we will do better. And that's it. These are girls who've got raped, and you say, well, we'll do better next time. No, there is no next time. You have to...
There shouldn't be next time. Like, it's not like we will do better next time. There shouldn't be next time at all.
Exactly. But these girls have... Again, some of them have gone to police. So the BBC actually did a program, 3 girls on this, a 3-part program. So the BBC have turned this basically into entertainment. That shows what level we are as a society, but at least they publicized the issue in doing it. But from that program, they put out that some of these parents would suddenly realize what was happening. And some of these girls are from broken homes. Some of them were in care. Some of them were from traditional families together. There's a whole range, but often they were from maybe more disadvantaged backgrounds where, yeah.
Sorry, I need to jump in. First of all, I don't think, especially the authorities who we pay them to serve us, can use the excuse of, oh, these people come from broken homes and those kids are under the care.
I agree.
So because if once you put that excuse, you are saying, oh, because they are from broken homes, they are under the care. Therefore, certain individuals can go and do them whatever they want to do. That is like already wrong mindset for people whom we are hiring to serve us.
I agree. I agree completely. These are the excuses they use. And they also basically say, again, Hatun, as Christians, we say every life has value. We're all made in the image of God. Every one of us has the same value. It doesn't matter what age we are, what color we are, what background. Each of us have the same intrinsic value as human beings made in the image of God. But when you look, not everyone shares that view. And these authorities have often said they're not worth it. We don't think of them. They're not kind of middle class background. They're not university educated. So again, that shows how despicable those in authority have become, that they look down and they don't treat people as human beings, but they treat them as lesser than themselves. We've seen that feeling time and time again in child services, in the local councils and in the police, that often parents would go to the police, would say, this is what is happening to my daughter. And the police would say, she's just a prostitute. She enjoys it. Leave her alone. How can a child agree to sex? That is impossible. If a child under 16 or 18, if they have sex with an adult, that is rape. It doesn't matter consent or not consent. A child cannot consent to that legally. And yet the police were deciding that those children were prostitutes and they were doing that of their own free will. They cannot in Britain. So our police officers are failing to understand what the law is. And
they're supposed to be the ones who practice the law.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they don't understand at the first place.
Exactly.
So in mainly Muslim majority countries, it seems it is happening in UK as well. But if the woman is being raped, judge ask what you were wearing. Okay. And then man says, because of her dress code, she was asking for. It seems to me that now British police is saying the same thing. Child who is underage, oh, she choose to do so. Unacceptable. Like it should be unacceptable. In UK, I'm not talking like in Iran or in Pakistan or in Saudi or in like just wrong.
But Hatun, we have begun to adopt those cultures. So today, on this topic, but different angle, today the top babies' names came out. So Noah is number one baby name in the UK. But then you look at the other names, you look at Muhammad with Muhammad is number 5. You look at Muhammad with Mohammed is number 35. You look at Muhammad Mohammad is number 83. If only Muhammad could have spelled his name right at the beginning, it would have saved all this, but we'll not go into that. But if you put all those, even those 3 versions of Muhammad together, Muhammad's the top name. Over 6,000 babies were born called Muhammad, and Noah's the next one at, I think, 5,000 or 4,800. But the headline of our media says Noah, number one baby's name. No, it's actually Muhammad. let's be honest about this. If Muhammad with an O, Muhammad with an U, Muhammad with an A, Muhammad with an E, it is Muhammad. It's all the same. So we have adopted, that shows, I think, where we are going as society, that we are adopting a culture that treats women very differently. And unless that is addressed, and I don't even know if we can address it, then actually we continue down this path of women being treated as second-class citizens, as slaves, as property of men. That's where we end up as a society.
Just wanted to understand a little bit more on, you expressed that BBC made a program with the victims of rape gangs. And then you expressed that it was more entertaining show than there is a problem needs to be solved or addressed. What do you think intention of media as they are trying to turn blind eye and ignore and even making entertainment from the rape events?
I think our media are not there to tell us truth. No, I know 100% they're not there to tell us truth. They're there to sell newspapers or to get viewers. That's what they're about. Our news has become, and 24-hour news becomes entertainment. So the media are always looking for stories. The newspapers are always looking for stories. They come across a story, great, they write about it. It's not about right or wrong, good or bad. It's simply the better story, the more exclusive, the sexier, the more outrageous, then that sells newspapers better. And the better the story for them, the closer to the front page it goes. So that's what I mean. It's become entertainment. So the BBC with three girls, they obviously wrote a whole script. They talked to some of these girls. They realized this is the story they're telling. They're not saying whether the story is true or not. They're simply saying this is what they're telling. And they got actors and they made a 3-part program about it, about what had happened. But they would say this is a drama based on events. But it was never meant to be a documentary. It was a drama which was based on events, but the BBC weren't necessarily saying this was true or false. It was simply to get viewers. That if the BBC don't get any viewers, then they don't operate it. If Sky don't get any viewers, they don't operate. It's all about entertainment. And if you can get a bigger story, a more exciting story, a sicker story, then that may pull in more viewers. Look, we've seen programs on Jimmy Savile, for instance. We've seen programs on Maxwell. We've seen programs on Epstein. We've seen so many programs on dark areas of society, of humanity. And often we find those dark areas are intriguing, and actually it sells newspapers, it sells books, it makes films, it does TV, and that's what it's about. Now, there may have been some people involved in the program who were shocked when they came across it and wanted to tell the story. So I'm not labeling everyone with that brush, but I think I've come to see the media as nothing to do with truth and simply happy to tell a story if it will assist their organization.
I think in 21st century, if anyone, doesn't matter what is their background or what doesn't matter what is their education, give the image a rape is just a drama, I really don't want to be close to them on the day of judgment. It is just disgraceful. So you talked about approximate 420 men is being convicted. A couple of years ago, I did live stream and went through book Easy Meat, and then we kind of talked through a little bit of that. If anyone wants to watch that, check that out. That was a couple of years ago. So as you expressed, 420 men, and approximately 84% of them has Muslim name. Who is paying for their court cases? I am assuming, I don't want to be mean, but I am assuming lots of those people are simply not rich enough, even though they were getting like approximately £2,000 from just giving one girl for sex, they don't have enough money to deal with all those court cases or legal things. Who is paying for those things? And do you know, have you got any information on that? I'm curious about that, because I know
Okay.
lawyers are very expensive.
Yeah, this is a whole other side of it. So on this, my understanding is that if you're accused of a crime, so a man is accused of raping a girl, then he will be arrested and he will go through the court system, and that is paid by our taxes for our criminal system. And I don't have any issue with that. We need to have a system that works. The problem is it's broken and doesn't work, but that to the side. You need a criminal system in society to punish those who break the law. You can't have a law if you don't have a punishment. So you need to have police, you need to have courts, then you need to lock people away, you need to build prisons. All of that you need as a functioning society. The problem we have is that we often find these men are sentenced and they then go to jail. They then often appeal. Now, on those appeals, they can apply for government money. I'll give you one example, the Rochdale Nine, and we had done a petition soon after we launched Hearts of Oak back 2020. So I think June, July 2020, we initiated, we started a petition to call on the government to deport the Rochdale Three. So there were 9 members of the Rochdale Nine gang jailed in 2016, 2018, I think, or it could have been before actually. And 3 of them had dual nationality. 3 of them were British passport holders and Pakistani passport holders. So we had got a petition and called on the government to deport them immediately. That got 100,000 in 3 or 4 days. I was like, wow, massive support, massive anger. People could not believe that this was the case, that these men were kept here. I mean, the next plane to Pakistan, there are 30 planes a week to Pakistan. Put them on any of those and just get them off. Drop them in Pakistan. They can face trial there. Whether that will be a good trial, I don't care. As a British citizen, they should not be in our country, so get rid of them. So 3 of them had dual nationality. The British government called on them to have their British nationality stripped. They said, no. We like our British nationality. We like our British passports. So we can rape girls and do things here. It's wonderful life for us. Therefore, we will fight that. Now, the Sun had done a story, I think it was a year and a half ago, and they had assessed these men had got just over £1 million in legal assistance to fight the British government to send them. So let me just repeat that. 3 men, Pakistani and British nationals, they rape young girls. They rape girls. The British government say, we're going to send you to Pakistan. And they say, no, we want you, the government, to give us money so we can fight that decision to send us away. And the British government say, okay, we'll give you money because that's what we do in Britain. So they gave them £1 million for them to fight that. Now, I've seen other figures of up to 2 million spending,
Okay.
but
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Brother, you just went too fast for me. So I didn't understand that. So, someone who holds 2 nationality, Pakistani and British passport. Of course, British passport gives you lots of freedom. Through the petition, they are going to send back to their home countries to deal with the trial over there. They are appealing, and I am the one who is contributing their appeal. Approximately altogether, every taxpayers are paying £1 million.
Yes, all of us through our tax.
Okay.
Every time we earn money each month or by week, you pay your tax, and a small
So
part
my
of
money,
that tax.
just a second.
Your money.
I've got heart
Your
issues.
money.
I've got heart issues, okay? So my money went to someone's court appeal
Yep.
for who raped a child. and who wanted to stay in this country.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for unpacking that for me. That was my money. Okay.
And again, Hutchin, this is when I look at this politically, I think, well, I'm someone who'd see myself as centre right, Conservative Party. I was involved in UKIP. Labour is on the left, and I don't agree with those values. And you think actually a government on the right, a Conservative government, would be fighting for individuals' rights, would be fighting for those to be punished. The Conservatives often are called a party of law and order. So you implement the law and order, you punish those who've broken the law. And yet these three individuals, for years, for I think 4 years now, the British government have been trying to send them abroad. I mean, it's our government that somehow isn't letting itself get rid of rapists from our country. They stay here, they walk our streets, they go to our supermarkets, they could bump into us on the train, on the bus, and they're allowed to live their lives as normal. While our government decides, actually, we will pretend to deport them, we'll pretend to want to deport them, but actually our system means that we can't do that. And
okay,
that's where we are.
I'll share information. According to Telegraph, 28th of June 2020. Okay. People who are involved of raping girls who were supposed to be sent back to their home countries or their original country, they renounced their citizenship for that country, Pakistan. So now, yeah, it's on Telegraph. It is talking about like how they, to avoid the deportation, now they renounced their citizenship for Pakistan. They are not Pakistani and British anymore. They are just British now. So you can't send them. I guess for their appeal, probably I paid for it as well.
You did. And I'm looking, so the ringleader of the Rothschild grooming gang, and it's in every newspaper, Abdulaziz, known as the Master. 2016, the government begun the process of trying to get rid of him. And 2022, in June, the government said they were unable to send him away. So the Home Office have announced that after all they're trying, that he will not lose his UK citizenship and they will not deport him to Pakistan. How evil is our government to actually care more about a rapist's rights than a child's rights? I mean, everyone should have right, but I think if you rape children, you begin to lose rights in society. And certainly if you can get rid of them, get them out of your country, they can be someone else's problem. They're not our problem. The role of a government is to protect its citizens. And if the government cannot protect its citizens, we don't have a functioning government any longer.
It just reminds me Jesus's attitude towards children and how they are precious in his eyes versus how these earthly governments are dealing with people who are abusing these children. Just, I don't know what is like other word than ugly, just disgusting. Families turning blind eye. Government turned blind eye. Councils turned blind eye because they didn't want to come across as Islamophobe. Police turned blind eye. And I, as someone who lives in this country, contribute to those people who abuse those children to fight their right to stay in this country so that once they are out, they will have more freedom to go and do the same.
Can I tell you something which is even worse on top of this? I'm sorry, but let me tell you one. I think it's important for your viewers to have a proper assessment of where we are. Whenever so you have a court, let's say with the Rochdale 9 men convicted, sentenced away between 4 and 22 years, but 8 of them were between 4 and 9 or 4 and 10 years. Get out after good behavior half of that time. The girls who were raped, they don't get anything. So they have to go through a court process. They have to give evidence. They have to give statements. They have to be investigated by the police. They have to have the police asking whether they're a liar or not, whether they really wanted it, and whether they were part of it, and the police deciding that actually it's okay to have sex with children. So all those questions there, they've gone through a traumatic experience, and now they go through another traumatic experience on being investigated by the police, not trusted by the police. I mean, when I grew up, if a child said something, you would take them at their word and then you would look into it. But now we are a case where a child actually say this happened as a child and it's completely dismissed. Surely the most vulnerable in our society should be listened to and ascertained, but often our police are making a judgment, an assumption they're a liar. So we've got the process. They go through all of this legal work, which is an awful system for the victim, or actually these girls are not, they're survivors. They've actually survived this and actually are still standing, many of them. And that's the great thing about them. They found that inner strength to actually still get on with their lives. But the men go away to jail, and then that's it. The girl then, it's finished. She walks away. She goes home. She sits on her sofa, her chair at home, and that's it. There is very little help.
So there is nothing there for them. Like do they get any emotional support? I'm guessing like no financial support at all, but any emotional support after all that integration they went through police?
Well, the government have said they get so many millions a year to help these girls. Okay, well, let's take that. I think I worked it out with Lord Pearson. We looked through some of the figures. We said, let's say 250,000 girls. Well, not take 1 million, take 250,000. We'll look at what the government claim they give, the money, and it worked out like £3 or £4 per girl. So it's irrelevant. So if the government say we give millions, yes, but there are 250,000 girls affected, and it's not just the girls, it's their families, it's the brothers and sisters, the parents. I mean, they must be utterly traumatized that this has happened to their child. And yet there is a couple of pounds each for anything. So obviously the system doesn't work. They don't get the help, and they actually don't get any compensation. There's no financial reward to those girls.
Yeah, I meant like in the emotional support. Like someone simply like forcing himself to a child, so that like will stay in the mind of child like for a long time.
Yeah.
So does the government provide any emotional support, or what do we call those things?
It would be counseling or emotional support.
Yeah.
The government claim that they have put money in, and Lord Pearson has asked this many times in the House of Lords, and the government come back and they say, well, you'll be delighted to know that we have spent 4 million over the last 2 years, and over the next 3 years we'll be spending another 6 million. But 250,000 girls. So if you're spending 10 million, then it's literally what? That's a couple of pounds, £10, whatever per girl. It's irrelevant. It doesn't affect those girls. It's a nice political statement. But when you go down to the actual people, it's nothing. It doesn't have any impact at all. So no, there is basically no help, no assistance to these girls. They walk home, they sit down, they sit at home by themselves, and they've been traumatized by the event, they've been traumatized by the court system, and they sit at home and
there's no counseling, no one. Nope. Like still, it's not like only everyone turn blind eye, because so very basic thing is if you are silent about what's happening around you, If you are silent, what's happening around you, you are already contributing that, okay? So when those girls are being raped, people were silent. That's not enough. After rape finished, people are being kind of, issues are kind of start being on the conversation. Still, we are not doing anything for those girls, and we are taking part in their abuse by being silent. We are not giving them any support mechanism.
Nope.
Welcome to Great Britain.
Exactly. And I mean, I could go through so many of the question. Lord Pearson has probably put down about 20, 25 questions to the government about this over the time. And it basically ends up that the government don't really want to do anything. In fact, he often has to put a question in to demand they answer the question. This is how, and legally, they must answer the question of a member of parliament within 21 days. But they're not doing this because they just ignore it. They don't want to talk about it. And it doesn't affect them getting voted in either. So from a purely selfish point of view, it doesn't affect their kind of re-election campaign if we really boil down to what matters. Now, there's some good MPs who talk about this a little bit. We had a grooming gang debate in the House of Commons where there was a petition to demand a debate on this, and about 20 MPs went there. I think it was 6 of them complained of the far right stirring this issue up. What? So you're blaming someone for telling you something bad is happening. Why not fix the bad thing instead of blaming the person for telling you?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask my last 3 questions. Okay, ready?
Go for it.
Overall, couple of 100,000 girls are being affected. Police turn blind eye, councils turn blind eye, we turn blind eye, government is turning blind eye. And people are able to get away with their actions without dealing with the consequences of their actions. You are British. This is not a personal question, okay? This is not like any insult or anything. How did we get here?
We got here by our media. This is part of the answer, I think. Our media and our government becoming embarrassed at British values, which I think have been traditionally Christian values, and they have brought in multiculturalism. So instead of right and wrong, good or bad, you treat people with respect, you treat people as you want treated yourself. Ideas that kind of you grew up with in Britain. I grew up in Northern Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, but it's all part really the same understanding and outlook for society. But we have decided that our culture is bad and any other culture that comes in is good. Now, it's impossible to say what we have in Britain is bad, but what you have in France is good, or Pakistan is good, or Saudi Arabia is good, or Australia is good. You have to look at each society, each culture by itself. And our government have failed to see that there is a huge clash between Islam and its values or non-values, and the values we have in the West, which are traditionally based on scripture and the Bible traditionally, but not so much anymore. And because if you don't see something coming that will change what you have, then you can't do anything about it. So it's that, I think, embrace of multiculturalism where all other cultures good and our culture bad, that we have thrown out our understanding of what works in a society, and we've adopted anything and everything else. And when you do that, you just have chaos in your society. That's my kind of assessment, I think, of where we are. My other assessment is that as a society, we have abandoned God. That's also my feeling, that are people who call themselves Christian and have those values in their life, that has decreased in the West, where if you look at Latin America, Africa, Asia, actually we see a massive growth of the church, where in the West we see a decline. And I think as you take Christianity out, you replace it with something else. And that vacuum is replaced by something else. And in parts of the West, we're seeing the rise of Islam as a strong, supposedly muscular, confident. That's how it's seen. And it puts itself into that vacuum and it asserts its values.
Well, I am immigrant in this country. So that wasn't easy to hear. And you get to hear the disadvantage of that. Completely agree that we become godless, and when people run away from God, we get to see such ugliness gets bigger and bigger. At this stage, what are the best ways to tackle with this problem at this stage?
I actually, in many issues in our society, and I think one of the big issues is the Islamization that we have. And you kind of look at what's happened, and I actually am not very sure, because if people do not want to, we live in a society where truth doesn't exist. Your truth can be anything, my truth can be anything, and they can be opposite. You can look at something that's red, and for you it's green, for me it's blue, and we're both right. When 2 and 2 can make 5, 6, 7, and no one is wrong, then society has collapsed. And I think we are in the middle of a collapse of our civilization in the West, where truth doesn't matter. And unless we come to a point, I was going to say unless we repent, but unless we come to a point where we decide and come around an understanding of what truth is and realize that truth is important in society, then the collapse continues. And maybe it's just part of history. Look at societies, they rise and fall. It's happened throughout history. And I think the society we have in the West, in Europe, in America, in Australia and Canada, that was based on biblical values, as that has been pulled away, it's collapsed. And we're seeing the rise of other values with Islam. We're seeing the rise of other values in China, where they have zero values. And those will be the dominant powers, I think, that have replaced what we had in the West. How do we solve? I don't know how we solve it, because I've looked at this for 10 years. And although we have convictions, we aren't really in much of a better situation. You can't talk about it. We have lenient sentences. People are allowed to walk out after a couple of years. The girls don't get any help and assistance. And if you talk about this, you're racist. So that's where we are. And it's the same situations we have been over 10 years. So I actually don't see a silver bullet, a magical way out of this. I don't know. I would probably guess that you probably have the same assessment, unless you know a magic way out of it.
No.
I'm sorry. I being in politics, been years in politics, you always think, well, this is the problem. There has to be a solution. We have to find a way through this. We have to get to where we're going. But when you're faced with a barrier, and actually there doesn't seem to be a way around it.
If people are choosing to run away from God, and if people are choosing to practice such an ugliness, like forcing things, seems not being helpful at all, and just made it worse and worse. Sadly, since we can't even identify the problem, we cannot say this is Islamic problem, and we are shut down when we say it. It makes it bigger problem, and then like you are forced to just close your eyes and then pass by. And ugliness of broken world. And if you are going to be called racist because you are expressing the problem of Islam when it comes to rapes in Britain, when it comes to grooming gangs, I think take that as a privilege that you are racist. If you are called racist because of that, take that as a privilege. My last question is, I know I kept you extra, sorry about that. My last question is, I know my sorry face looks happy as well. What are the things we can do for the victims, for those girls who've been raped, who've been abused, who've been trafficked, who's been tortured? What are the things we can do for them?
It's difficult what to do for the individuals because there are so many. I've talked to, I mean, Jane Senior has done so much work on this. Where's her? This was her. This is Jane's book, Broken and Betrayed. That's actually a good book to read about understanding the issue, not necessarily reading the personal stories. And Jane was a social worker, and she ran a clinic for girls to come to talk to if they had sexual issues and wanted to talk privately. So it was a safe place for them to come and have helps, assistance. And Jane ran that for years. She has been one of the most vocal individuals about what has been happening. She has been investigated by the police, I think 18 times now, because they want her to shut up. You couldn't make any of this up. So she is doing a fantastic work. And I think what most of us can do is maybe highlight what the situation is. It could be getting one of those books and reading up. It could just be looking through newspaper stories. I think if we educate ourselves to the evil that is there, then we have an understanding of what it is, and we can say, how do we oppose this? How do we speak against this? I mean, this all happens in the shadows. Most of us, our lives won't kind of connect with this. It is groups that we won't be associated with. We won't know. So most of us are not in a specific position that we can change what is happening. But I think education is vital, and it's up to us to speak about it and not be silenced. There isn't a specific way to help these girls. Look up Maggie Oliver and Jane Senior, I think, are the two individuals who have done more than anyone else. And Andrew Norfolk, the journalist, writing about it. And follow what they do and maybe sign up to what they're putting out and follow that. And maybe they might have specific ways you could help. It might be financial, it might be practical. But I think those two, Maggie Oliver and Jane Senior, are the two heroes in this. There are two women who are fiery, who don't care what they're called, and want to do all they can do to help these girls. So follow them on social media, and that will give you an idea of maybe what you can do to help.
Thank you. I wish I had you for like more hopeful topic. Nothing personal though, but it seems you are opening our eyes more and more how the world is becoming dark. And as a Christian, hopefully that stir our hearts, because in Isaiah 8, it talks about like everything messed up. It's dark and dark and dark, and light steps into the darkness. So I am, as a Christian, convinced that solution to this darkness is Lord Jesus Christ. And there are practical steps we should be taking, especially as a Christian. We cannot turn blind eye when we see injustice around it, when we see people are being abused and harmed. Like Book of Amos talks about like how we shouldn't turn blind eye in such a situations. And bottom line is, when God saw where we were in need of something, when God saw we were in need of somebody, his son didn't turn and then walk back. His son stepped into the world to rescue and redeem us. I think that is the solution that the world needs, especially when people are intentionally running away from God, intentionally turning their back to God. We get to see the world becomes dark and dark place. Hopefully that will open and shake our hearts a little bit, so that we actively stand up and speak when we see such an abuse, when we see people who are made in the image of God is being affected with the certain human actions. It should stir our hearts and put us in action.
Hatu, can I say one thing that just finally, that I agree that as Christians we approach this differently, and John 1 says the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not overcome it, and that's about Jesus being the light of the world. And as Christians, we believe that actually God wins in the end, that because of what Jesus has done, that death is defeated, that death is conquered. And because of that, that's how we approach this. Now, if you're not a Christian, it could be so depressing. And that's why I think people like you, like Jay Smith, what I do, as Christians, we do it, but we know that actually we have hope. Even if it's dark, that doesn't change the fact that we have hope. So our outlook is not one that actually, it may be bad, but we're not going to get depressed, because we know that we have the ability to bring light and hope into every situation. And it doesn't matter how bad the darkness is, the light always overcomes it.
Yeah. And like Isaiah 8 is talking about finishes with darkness. And then Isaiah 9 is talking about how the sun is given to the world for light. Peter, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much sharing these informations and stirring our hearts. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate your time and your input. And thank you very much, everyone in the chat who joined us. By God's grace, we will see you on another live stream, or at Speaker's Corner, or at the bosom of the Father, whichever comes first. May Christ crucified silence you with his love until we see you again.
Amen. Thank you.